I still want to make a game. My name is MKayJay. So first off, I want to thank you for your support and input to my first video about making a new game. I've got more feedback and input than expected, and I really appreciate that. For the last few days I've been into Red Dead Redemption since it just got released for the PC, so I thought I would show some footage of the game while I'm talking a bit about this whole game making thing. So I hope you enjoy the footage. So as I mentioned in the last video, I have a lot of ideas and I've gotten some input from some of you. So I've taken your ideas and mine and boiled it down to a handful of ideas which I think could be interesting to explore. So I'll go through them in this video. Since I could easily rant on and on about these ideas, I'll try to limit each idea to 2 minutes or less. So to not put bias on any of the ideas and just to keep this video fairly short and concise. This probably also means I'll be doing quite a lot of editing in this one. A survival game. The first idea I'd like to talk about is the idea for a survival game. So we all know there's quite a lot of those out there right now, so I'll try to focus on the aspects that I find interesting and unique compared to other survival games. In this idea, it's meant to be more of a hardcore kind of game where the difficulty is a bit high and you need to manage your energy intake and how you spend your energy. So you start out with next to nothing on what could be an island or in the wilderness. As with most survival games, you need to gather materials and craft tools and shelter. The part that I want to focus on here is the time and energy that is a big factor. Let's for instance say that you want to go chop down a tree. So in most games you hit the tree a few times and then you've cut it down. But I kind of want this to be reflected that it takes more time and that it costs you energy. So in order for this to be gameplay friendly, I want to make it so that time speeds up whenever you do a chore. So let's call these things chores that you would usually do in a game, like chopping a tree, building something, cooking some food. So basically everything you do is then a chore. And whenever you do a chore, time speeds up. So different chores requires different amount of energy and time. This also means that very big chores like building a shelter could probably require you to pause and resume the chore multiple times because you need to go eat and drink and rest in between. So let's keep to the tree chopping example. It takes a certain amount of energy, certainly more energy than just walking around. So while you're doing that, the game time speeds up, which also means that you burn your energy way faster. So this makes the key element of the game to always manage time and energy contra your energy input, which essentially boils down to what survival is, in my opinion. So as with most survival games, the idea is then over time for you as the player to get more and more comfortable, so you at some point break the barrier between surviving and thriving. A community-based game. So this idea is not a game idea in itself, but more of an addition that could fit into many games, like the survival idea we just discussed. So for the sake of presenting this idea, I'll refer to the previous survival idea. So this idea is inspired from the game State of Decay, and if you're familiar with that game, this concept should be easy to understand. Basically, you control one character at a time, but you have a whole community of different people that you can then switch to whenever you want. Or maybe with some restrictions depending on how the game mechanics are. So each character in this community then have various skills and abilities that you maybe can increase by playing and utilizing them. So for instance, you could have a good fisherman and another is good at foraging or even building. You can then switch between them to utilize the different skills rather than just having one character where you level all the skills. And when a character dies, it's permanent, which also makes it important to care about your community and take care of your characters. There could be many other elements added to this, like maybe you could breed all your people in order to try to get the best characters or the characters with the best potential. Maybe these characters could also have personalities, so you also need to kind of manage who you put together with who, because some works better with others and some simply can't work together. And there's a lot of layers or RPG elements you could put on top of these characters, so with the skill systems and all of that. A 2D survival game. So personally, I've always had a fondness for the game called Terraria. And in the last video, you actually saw some gameplay from my own attempt at making a 2-dimensional survival game. I kinda like the base idea of how Terraria is, but it could be fun to add or extend it with more survival-like elements, like the need to gather food and water. And the idea here is then to combine it with that community element we discussed earlier, which means that you would have several characters in your base where you can either attract them or however you get them, and then you can switch between those and again utilize their different skills. There's always a chance when trying to make a game that looks like another game that you end up making a blatant copy of it. And I think it's very important that if this is a direction we move in, that we clearly define what is unique about the game that we want to make. Because I think it's very okay to be inspired by other games and even borrow some of the features that they did in a good way. I mean, why reinvent the wheel? But we should just be very careful that we're not just making a clone of another game. A strategy deathmatch game. So this idea can easily become too complex, but I think it's fairly easy to explain. So you have a selection of army units that you can buy, and then you put them together to form your army. So for instance, you could buy a group of archers, a group of cavalry, and maybe some footmen. You then place your army on a battlefield, and then you put it into action against another player or computer who also has an army, and this is then a real-time battle. So the idea here is to be strategic in the way that you deploy your armies, but also the way you move them around. And if you win, you earn more money to upgrade or repair or even buy new units to your army. So this is meant as a quick match system, like each match maybe is at most 20 minutes, and the concept should be kept fairly simple as it's not meant to be overly complex. So it's not meant to be a whole battle simulator, but more like a quick strategic deathmatch kind of game. You could spice the game up with additional layers, like you could have experience for each army or even each unit in the army, and as well as maybe you need to manage the gear, and you could even have experience levels on yourself to add various bonuses to your army. So as to kind of have this whole sense of progression, which is something I really like in games. An RPG strategy deathmatch game. So I'm not really sure what to call this idea, but basically the idea is a bit similar to the previous one. Instead, here you put together a group of adventurers with various abilities and classes, and then you fight all the adventurers on monsters. But the difference here is that this is a turn-based combat game, and it goes on a grid, and then each time each team take turns moving their characters. This could either be something like one team moves their character, so the other team moves their character. It could be based on the speed of your characters, or maybe you just take like a full turn where you move all your characters and then the next move all his characters. There's some choices to be made there already. So again, in this game, strategy as well as group composition can be very important. And this is also meant to be a quick game where each fight is maybe between 5 to 20 minutes. And when you win, you find loot and gold, which you then use to improve your characters. You could even add some extra focus on the character advancement and gear to make things more interesting. So you have like maybe a more complex, or complex is maybe not the right word for it, but a nice leveling system that kind of gives you this sense of accomplishment. And you could even put together dungeon adventures where you progress through several battles and eventually meet a boss. So a dungeon could be like 3 battles and maybe then 1 boss. It's not like you as a player will navigate through these dungeons, but you will kind of be presented each battle that you encounter in the dungeon. Maybe if you've played the game Hearthstone, there's similar dungeon runs where you basically just do battles, these card battles against opponents until you beat the dungeon. I think of all the ideas that I've mentioned so far, this is probably one of the easiest to implement and has the smallest scope. And now that I think of it, I suppose the whole community idea from earlier could also be partially implemented to this one. So you sort of have a roster of adventurers that you can then bring on each expedition or into each battle. A horror game. So in my previous video, I already shared that I've been working on a horror game before, but I thought it was a decent idea as this is a bit of a smaller scope than the one I worked on earlier. So the premise is fairly simple. It's something like, if you know the classical Slender games, where you basically walk around in an environment, usually in darkness and with creepy sounds, and then you need to find various objects. So in Slender, this was the pages, and you need to do that before you're being caught by the bad guy, in that case Slenderman. And the further you progress, the harder it gets, because the antagonist, let's call it that, kind of gets more and more dangerous, basically. So these games kind of build on the feeling of being watched or chased all the time, which is, I think, is a huge driver in these types of games. It could be fun to come up with various antagonists for this type of game. So the idea would not just be you go in and then you dance around with the Slender guy, but every time you play, it's a random or even more of these antagonists that are randomly chosen, which makes it harder to predict how to survive. And it would also add more of these, let's call it negative feelings of uncertainty to the whole gaming experience. It could be fun to experiment with different types of monsters that could chase you. So it would be a very mechanic focused development, because I think setting up the whole environment where you walk around and pick up things is fairly easy to do, but coming up and implementing the mechanics for various monsters or antagonists that chase you could be the interesting part here. Anyways, that was all the ideas I wanted to share for now. I tried to keep the details to a minimum and just kind of draw a general picture of each idea. I think most of these ideas are viable both as a single player and a multiplayer concept, but some of them might need some tweaking to fit into a multiplayer setting. Also, a combination of the various ideas could be fun to play with as well, as long as we keep remembering to limit our scope, otherwise we'll never finish. So, does any of these ideas seem interesting to you? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on them, and also if you have any ideas that you'd like to share, it would be nice to hear them. Remember, there's no stupid ideas, as even those ideas you might consider stupid could be the inspiration for another really awesome idea. So do keep that in mind. I'll be monitoring the feedback over the next few days from this video, and based on that, I'll see where we go from there. If none of these ideas is to your guys' liking, I will be happy to pull out a few more ideas. I have, as I said, plenty of ideas. These are probably just some of my favorite ideas that I'm fairly certain that I wouldn't mind working on for a long period of time. And also, if you have any questions either about this whole process or to any of these ideas, I'll be happy to answer them. Leave them in a comment and I'll either answer you in the comments or I will address them in the next video we make. Anyways, thanks for watching, and remember, do leave a like down below to show your support. I appreciate that. And also, if you're new here and you want to join us on this journey, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well. Thank you so much for watching, and you'll see me in the next video.